Hey guys, Paradoxio here. Welcome back to a brand new video, everyone. This is episode 2 of our game development in Python series, and in this video we are going to be blitting an object onto our screen and adding some basic movement capabilities to that object. So that way we can finally add some sort of gameplay functionality to our new game. We're also going to dive just a tiny bit into FPS and why it can matter whenever we are moving objects across our game window. Before we get started, I did want to leave a little disclaimer and apologize that the quality of this video is not the best. I had to record this video about 5 different times because my recording software is pulling a big stupid and just shutting down mid-recording. So if you're watching this, that means I got lucky and it didn't happen this time, and hopefully it will not happen. Otherwise I'm not going to be very happy. But let's get that out of the way now. Just forget about that even happening, and let's dive into our code. Now, this is all from last episode. We set up our while running loop, and whenever we run our code, we get this neat little black window. Pretty cool. Let's go to the documentation real quick, and let's go down to this second code example down here. This is mainly what we are going to be working with today. So in this code example, they are setting up their Pygame game. They're setting up their while running loop, their events, and then what they're doing here is they're drawing a circle onto the screen, and then they're using your keyboard input to essentially move that circle across the screen using W, A, S, and D keys. And then they create an FPS clock here, so that way we can have a constant refresh rate. Now this is essentially more of a physics simulation than a video game, but overall they're using the same functionality that we are going to be using whenever we are writing to our game, and we are going to add this movement functionality so that way we can have a player that can move in any direction that we want it to. So we're mainly going to be working from this code sample right here. I'm going to go ahead and exit out of that documentation, and then we're going to go inside of our while running loop here, and we are going to start by defining a couple of things like keys. Now, this keys here is what we're going to be using to check which key on our keyboard is pressed, and based on that key, we are going to move. Now, there's a couple things I want to talk about before we start writing our movement functionality. And if I go ahead and run this code here and look at this black window, what I mainly want to talk about is how this window is set up. So I want you guys to think of this window as an X and Y graph. You may be quick to assume that the origin is somewhere right here in the middle, but actually it is up at the top left. And another thing to note is when we are moving across our X-axis, if we are going in the right direction, we are going in the positive direction. In other words, our X value will continue to grow. If we go the left direction, we are going in the negative direction, meaning our X value will shrink. Now this is normal. This is how it should be. This is how a X-axis works on all graphs. Now the Y-axis, on the other hand, is flipped in Pygame. Since 0, 0 starts up here, if we go down, we are actually going to increase in Y value, whereas on a normal Cartesian plane, we will shrink. So down here, Y is equal to 600, and up here is Y equal to 0. Now, if we go up, our Y becomes negative, and we don't ever want it to be negative. Otherwise, our character will not be on the screen anymore. So that is something you should keep in mind whenever we are getting into our movement functionality. Let's go ahead and exit that, and let's define a couple of things for our character, like our X and Y position. So let's call this player X, let's set it to 100. Player Y, let's set it to like 250. Now, for a square, we have to have a color for it, and I'm going to make this a bluish color. Now, the thing about colors in Pygame is they are RGB values, so red, green, blue from 0 to 255 on each value. So this is going to be a tuple of type int, int, and int, or all three being integers. Now, if you're not very used to RGB values, what we could do is we could go to our browser and look up RGB color picker. And if you're using the Google engine, you should see something like this, where we can just drag this little circle here and pick whatever color that we want. I like this little light baby blue color, so I'm going to copy and paste this RGB value here that is separated by 2 commas. Go back to my code and paste it right here. Now we need to define one more thing called player speed. And this can be something like 1 or 5. And this is how many pixels our player is going to move across our screen in one single tick. Now that we have got that out of the way, let's go ahead and make our character. We could do this by typing in pygame.draw.rect, and it's going to take in the surface as an argument, and this is going to be our window, which we have declared up here in our last video. This is our display. Secondly, it's going to take a color, which is that tuple with 3 integers I was talking about. That is RGB values. We can pass that in like that. And then the last one's going to be a tuple, which is going to contain the X and Y position of our player and its size and width and height. So player X, comma, player Y. And then width and height, which is just going to be 50, comma, 50. So that way my square is 50 pixels by 50 pixels. Of course, you can make it as big as you want, it doesn't really matter. Last thing we need to do is we need to type in pygame.display.flip. And this is going to update the frame. It's going to update the current frame, and if I don't have this, our character won't show. And if I go ahead and run my code, we won't have anything. But if I add it, run the code again, our character now shows right here on our screen. Pretty neat, right? Can't really do anything with it yet. Nothing we can do until we add our movement. Now remember, I added the movement right here. And all I need to do, or I'm sorry, did I say I added the movement? I meant I added our keys right here. So to add our movement now, we need to type in if keys pygame.k_w. Remember, K is capitalized for Pygame. So that way we can access our key. Now, this is going to make our character move up. So remember, our Y axis is flipped. So to go up, we need to shrink our Y value. So we're going to subtract from our current Y position. If we're going down, we're going to add to our current Y position, because when we go down, our Y value increases. Now, that wasn't supposed to be an elif, but tab 9 just did it anyway. Let's go ahead and set up our x-axis movement. So remember, our x-axis is normal. If we move left, we subtract, and if we move right, we add, which we have done so with these operators here. But go ahead and run the code. Voila! Our character moves, but it's moving super fast and it's going to move on forever. How do we stop that? Well, that is where we get into FPS. Now, FPS is pretty simple to set up. All we have to do is just come up here, define a variable. I make it a constant. And then we're going to create another variable for our clock. And we're going to set it equal to pygame.time.clock. And down here at the very end of this while loop, we are going to type in clock.tick FPS. Now, you don't have to make this a constant, especially if you plan to make it to where your FPS can be changed by the player in an options menu and such, which we can look at that way in the future of this series. So let's run our code, and wow. Our movement works. And let's draw a better heart. Yeah, you could tell art wasn't my greatest skill, but we have movements going on. But it keeps drawing a new square over the other one, and we basically made a little paint game. So how do we fix that? Well, remember, in this while loop, we're continuously drawing a new rect, or a new square. So to fix that, we need to overlap the old one with the same color as our background to give the visual effect that we're only drawing one square and we're just moving it. We can do this by typing in window.fill, and we can pass in the color of our original background color, which is just black. So that's going to be 000 in RGB. And if I go ahead and run the code now, our square moves normally with our WASD keys. Well, what if I want to add functionality for arrow keys? Well, that's pretty simple. We can do so in here using an OR operator. We could type in OR keys pygame.k_up. And I'm going to copy and paste this on our other lines, and we're going to change the key itself. So for here, it'll be down, and for here, it'll be left, and for here, it'll be right. So now if I run this code, our arrow keys work too. So now we have support for our WASD and arrow keys. If I go ahead and play my game one more time, our character can run off the edge. We might not want that, especially for making a 2D platformer game, like Space Invaders or Pong. So how can we fix this? Well, you guys will see that in episode 3, where we add simple constraints, or I'm not really sure what to call, I guess walls to the sides of our screen to prevent our character from going off screen. We will add a little bit of functionality that constrains our player to the window. Let's talk just a tiny bit more about FPS. What is this FPS really doing? Well, it's essentially telling this while loop how many times it can run in a single second. So if my FPS is 60, that means this while loop will iterate 60 times every second. Well, what's going to happen if I change it to 120? Well, remember, our character moved a little bit slow, but now it can move pretty fast now that my FPS has doubled. And if I do 240, run it again, or let me fix that. There we go. It runs across the screen super fast. But it doesn't really look all that smooth. It kind of looks choppy to the human eye. Well, that's because every tick we are moving 5 pixels. If I could change that to 1 pixel and rerun our code again, it moves a lot smoother but slower because we are moving 5 times less every tick. We can increase our movement by just simply increasing our FPS. So now we are moving pretty quick across our screen again, and it looks a whole of a lot smoother to the eye. Pretty neat. Now this all of course comes down to preference. How smooth would you like your player to be able to move across the window? Well, that is honestly for you to decide, and it really depends on the game that you're making. If you're making an arcadey style game, then FPS may not matter much to you because nobody's really going to be asking to play your arcade style game at 200 plus FPS. But we can use FPS in Pygame to control the speed of the things going on in our game. So pretty neat. That is it for today's video. If you have enjoyed this video, be sure to subscribe, leave me a comment, and if you're loving this series as well, be sure to let me know down below. If you haven't already, join my Discord server and sign up on my official website at houseofcode.xyz. So far, you can upload your code and share any scripts to the public. Soon you will be able to upload your own forums and chat with other developers on my website. Again, that is it for this video. Be sure to subscribe, leave a like, comment down below, and I will see you guys next time. Have a great day, everyone. Bye-bye.